I'm here with Bas Warmerdam, and we're here talking about his company, Consulting Kids. So I thought this was so interesting when it comes to transformational leadership to talk about what the value is of seeing things through a child's eyes. But before we jump in too far, I'm getting ahead of myself. Bas, why don't you give us a little introduction about yourself and your company?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So my name is Bas Warmerdam. So I'm located here in the Netherlands, and I've got a background as a sort of a strategy consultant, which I always explain as I'm hired by people who have a problem, and I sort of pretend I know how to solve it. But about 10 years ago, I got acquainted with the fact that kids have this really nice view on the world. It's really unbiased and non-threatening, creative, and it would be cool to connect that creative thinking power to the complex issues I was working on as a strategy consultant. So 10 years ago, I just thought, let's do it. And so far, it's been a hell of a ride.
So you had this idea of having kids interact with business.
Yeah.
And so what kinds of things have you seen in your work so far of kids having insights that adults didn't have?
Yeah, well, actually, a couple of things. So one is kids really trigger into thinking about new concepts. So we did a lot of projects for public transport organizations to come up with new things that can be adapted in public transport. We did things for oil companies, for municipalities, whatever. So there's a trigger to new concepts, but what I always find really interesting, there's a nice change management angle to it. So kids come up with ideas, we translate that into something which fits within the context of the organization again. But suddenly, because it comes via this non-threatening source, people open up to it. And even a couple of weeks ago, somebody mentioned managers are turning into humans again, and that's happening. So they're opening up to these kind of ideas, and that's great.
That's amazing. So instead of change management, we should have kids coming in and explaining going through change because it's yeah. Well, listen, it's maybe a little bit more palatable than having some kind of slick consultant like me coming in and I don't mean to insult consultants because I am one, but that is kind of what, sometimes there's some resistance just purely based on the outsider coming in and making recommendations.
Yeah, and the nice thing is we still build on that same concept. So that's also why we called it consulting kids.
Mhm.
So it's still those professional consultants who get in, but it's a unique consultant because he has the thinking power of the kids behind him. And that's what makes it really interesting. So you still have that view from the outside, but in a totally different way. But with the same how do you say, the professional approach. And that combination makes it really cool. And a lot of times I get back from clients that was the most fun and inspiring thing they did the last 5 years. Well, I did a lot of work as a strategy consultant, but I never heard that back. So
So tell us a little bit about the process of how you bring kids into a strategy session, or how does that work exactly?
yeah, the starting point, that's our step one is we just go into a boardroom or a team session or whatever and ask them, what are your top 5 issues? No matter the complexity. So we always emphasize, forget about that we work with kids, but just explain your most complex issue. So ambition, dilemmas, question. That's step one. And if we and then we'll understand. And step two is we translate that into something that kids can understand. So in short, we write a fairy tale with all the dynamics of the actual issue in there, but in a way that kids can understand. So suddenly they're able to think about strategy or governance or sustainability or team dynamics or whatever. And then in the third step, we take over a couple of primary school classes. So that's in the age range of 9 to 12. And we just tell them the story, and that ends with the question, how should we solve this? And if I'm the classroom myself, I always emphasize, I'm this 48-year-old dull guy. I don't know. So please help me. And based on the program we set up, the kids start working on it in pairs, as a whole class, individually, and they come up with really cool stuff. Clients are present in the classroom. So you have all these people in suits there, but they're there to watch and to answer questions from kids. And then and the other side that's also good to mention is when we're working with kids, For them, it's all about learning problem-solving skills and a great experience. That's what's happening in the classroom. And then in the fourth step, we start looking at all the creative ideas of the kids, and they trigger us to new concepts. And that's what we translate it to. So sometimes one idea of a kid is so strong, we just have to explain it. But most of the times it's one idea from class one, another one from another class, and then we add it to a concept which already exists. And then that's where the magic happens. And then the final step is we take the clients through the output of all those sessions and ask them what are the best ideas, which ones did you like most, and how are we going to implement it? And that's the whole process, which takes about 2 months.
Oh, okay. So, um, for people listening or people watching that maybe aren't ready to bring this in, we'll get to that in a minute, how they can bring it in and or participate. What is something that they can do today to maybe see things more through a child's eyes or bring their own children into the conversation? Like, is there something people can do today?
Yeah, a very nice exercise that we do quite a lot within organizations as well is, just write down your own complex issue just in a couple of minutes. You're working on it in a daily basis.
Mhm.
And then challenge yourself, how am I going to explain this to a 10-year-old? And take that story home and ask your kids, tell them the story and ask your kids how they would solve it. And that's already a really nice first step. And what people will experience is if you have to translate it to somebody that the 10-year-old understands, you can't use all that management lingo because nobody understands what governance means or whatever. But how will you explain it? And that already creates great insights.
And a nice bond for parent and child too, that they can actually understand your work. I have one slide that I use to explain, having too much work in progress. And I'll tell you, my kids don't know anything else I do, but they do understand the dynamics of too much work in progress. That my kids know.
Cool. Yeah.
So then tell us about either how folks can work, how folks can engage with consulting kids. So one is to hire, but is there also, I think we had talked about like participating potentially as a facilitator. So tell us
Yeah.
about the sides of that.
Yeah. So there are two angles, and more information you can just find on consultingkids.com. But the first angle is we're already working in the Netherlands and in locations in Europe, and we would like to expand to the US as well. So we're looking for organizations who have complex challenges who are willing to pilot this with us. And that's really cool. So that's the first question. So if you're open for that, just reach out and we'll arrange something. The second angle is we're looking for cool people within the US who are willing to participate in this process. And those are people who have a real combination of consultancy and facilitation skills and who will be able to sort of manage this process in combination with our experience with translating those type of issues. So basically two calls to action there.
Okay, great. Wonderful. So we'll put that out to everybody. And Bas will also be on our roundtable call next week, which is, what's the date? Which is
4th of September.
September 4th, right? That's right. We talked about this. September 4th at noon Eastern. So I'll make sure that that link is in the newsletter as well, although I think it's going out this same morning. But if you can make it, that would be wonderful to hear more and go deeper on creativity of kids. Is there anything else that you want these folks to know, transformational leaders to know about consulting kids, Bas?
Not for now. Just reach out and we just have to experience together. I think that will be great fun. What did they say? The proof is in eating the pudding or something else. But it's not my
Yes.
native language, but you know what I mean.
That's it. You got it. That's exactly right. All right, excellent. Well, thank you so much. I look forward to participating in a session in the US or maybe flying somewhere to participate in a session because I think this is such a brilliant use of, a lot of times I talk about work as a new village because we don't really have villages with shoemakers and the kids would be part of those businesses. And this is a really nice way to bring multi-generational views into the workplace.
Great. Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.